Welcome to Yelling into the Void, a podcast discussing and exploring topics in World of Warcraft. I'm Tevin. Scott joins me as always.
Hello.
And Scott, I have a completely off the dome question for you.
Shoot.
Uh, why the hell do some class trees change based off what spec you're playing? Isn't that like the whole point of a class tree?
No, you're just wrong. You just don't understand the design philosophy at all. No, it doesn't make any sense. I don't know. I don't know. I mean, obviously the technical reason is because they got to something that would be completely broken for a certain spec, but fine for another spec. And instead of just dealing with the extreme difficulty of porting that over to the spec tree. They just left it on the class tree, but then just erased it for other people. I didn't even realize this at first until I think it was like the first time I was playing Holy Paladin in Dragonflight, and then I was like looking at this class tree, and I realized there was a node there that Red has that Holy just does not have. I can't even remember what the node is anymore, but there was something
It's
that Red just had that no one else got.
it's double freedom.
Oh yeah, that's the one. Yeah.
Yeah.
What the
Rhett
fuck?
and Prot have it.
What?
Holy does not.
Why
It's
not?
literally just blank.
Why not?
I
What?
don't know. The monk talent tree does the same shit.
Yeah.
I don't get it.
It's
I don't
weird.
get it at all.
It's weird. I don't know. I mean, yeah, it seems to deny what the intent of a class tree is, that this is the talents you pick for your class and this is the talents you pick for your spec, but these are going to be different also. I feel like the biggest problem I have with it is if they're okay with that, I can just see it eventually getting out of control, as that's just a lever or a tool they can use to tweak things to the point where suddenly class trees are just entirely different. Now that hasn't happened yet, but it certainly could.
I don't understand like what what is inherently broken about a holy pally having double freedom.
I don't know. I don't know. I'm trying to rack my brain to come up with a reason for that. Too much utility, just too much utility on your healer is just not fair. I don't know.
But shamans exist.
Yeah, but can shamans give you freedom that also gives it to themselves? No, they cannot.
No, they can just dispel poisons on everyone at the same time.
True.
Anyways,
Take that out of class
all
trees,
of this
Resto.
all of this nonsense and complaining and bitching about class trees not actually being class trees aside. We just wrapped up week 2 of season 1 for The War Within. And I've got to say, it's been interesting. It's been fun. And it's been a little bit frustrating. I don't know about you, but keys are probably my favorite thing to do in this entire game. And they have been absolutely fucking brutal.
Yeah.
Like,
They're pretty hard. Didn't we call this? I think we said this. I think if you rewind the tape, we called this very thing on the eve of the season, that this is what's going to happen, and it's going to be a rude awakening for everyone. I think perhaps we excluded ourselves from the rude awakening thing because we were like, oh, but we know this, so we're excluded. But no, it's been a rude awakening for me as well. And it's really interesting. We'll get into this in some detail later, but it's really interesting the way in which gearing now works via Mythic Plus and how different it is than it was in Dragonflight, and the ways in which that is causing some pain points with me, but I think with a lot of the community at large as well. Some expectations of what you're going to be able to do counter it by what the game wants you to do, and I think people are frustrated by that.
the other thing that is super just random to me is like, never in my career playing this game doing Mythic Plus was it like going from a 19 to a 20 was like something I dreaded.
Mm-hmm.
And it like, I don't look forward to doing 9 to 10 right now.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Mm-hmm.
the difficulty step in that is significantly higher. And on top of that, it still feels weird to me, and we can cover this a little bit later, that you still have 10, 11, 12, or I guess 10, 11 that have the Zalateth affix, fortified and tyrannical, and the 15-second death penalty. But when you get to 12, you lose the Zalateth affix. I just feel like we should have probably just added the secondary, like fortified or tyrannical at 12 rather than 10. It feels weird.
Maybe. Yeah, I mean, I think one thing that's definitely true is, at least never in my experience playing this game, the affix breakpoints have felt tough. Moving from a 6 to a 7 is tough. Moving from a 9 to a 10 is tough. These are difficult jumps. And I'm assuming when we get there, I'm not there yet, but moving to a 12 from an 11 is also pretty tough. There are some dungeons that even the best players in the world are just hard stuck at a 12. They have not been able to time a 12. There's some dungeons
Mhm.
they've done a 14 of, like I think Mist's a 14's been done. I think um one of the spider ones, I'm never going to remember the names of them. I think Arakara is the one
Yeah.
that's a little bit easier. That a 14's been done, but yeah, keys like Grimbatol is just like hard stuck at 12. Which is weird. So here's the thing that I think is actually happening. The thing that is weird about this is mostly, not entirely, but mostly related to the key squish. Um
Mhm.
because once upon a time, when you started a new season, you booted up the morning of the new season, you got your key, it was a 2, and then you started running your key with your friends or with pugs, whatever. You got into the 2. Unless you were like a brand new player or someone that didn't have a lot of experience with the system, probably going to +3 that 2, right? Boom. Okay, now I got a 5. Let's get into our 5. Probably going to +3 my 5. Boom, I've got an 8. Let's do it. Probably going to +3 the 8, maybe +2. So now we're talking, boom, I've got a 10. And so now you've done 1, 2, 3, 4 keys, and you're still just kind of getting warmed up.
Mhm.
Now you could, like, let's say you +2 or +3 and 11 or 12, then you're sitting at like a 13 or 14, then you're at 15. And so the amount of keys that you do to kind of build up to where the game starts getting really, really difficult is so much more vast. And so right now, the weird thing that happens is you go in at a 2, still, like, the 2s are still easy enough that I don't know, I've +3 to all the 2s that I've done, which is not too many. That gets you to a 5. Boom, you +2 the 5, and boom, you're at a 7. And suddenly the game is hard. And that's 2 keys, and the game is hard. And that is a weird feeling. It is a weird
Yeah.
feeling that the progression path is just much, much quicker. It's much shorter. And that you just get to the part where you're struggling much faster. And I think that is throwing a lot of people, myself included, off a little bit.
I think that coupled with one of the things that I want to talk about in one of our main segments today is really kind of the like we need to take a step back from what we're doing and really like analyze what we are talking about this
Hmm.
week. So I'm going to table this for now because we do have a whole segment that I want to cover Mythic Plus and kind
Sure.
of like season 1 woes. Um, but the other things that kind of happened news wise in the WoW world, Race the World First concluded. Again, we'll talk about that a little bit later in the show. We had what I think relatively recently, the last couple days or so, some dungeon and raid tweaks,
Yeah.
um, which I think for the most part, reading through them have been good. None of them have I really read and been like, what? Which is awesome. I think that means that Blizzard's kind of monitoring the feedback and hopefully these tweaks will kind of smooth out some pain points. I can tell you from experience, I don't know if it's just the fact that we are dealing with tyrannical instead of fortified right now, but I've done 2 Grim Battles today. One of them I +2'd and one of them I +1 at a 9. Last week I couldn't get a group to complete a 9 Grim Battle. So I would say that dungeon is at least significantly easier.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, so it seems like Blizzard's listening. And then I think the last thing to really cover is a little bit of sadness. The Echo MDI team, I think, is officially done now, which is, I don't know. I don't know how to feel about this. I'm really sad to see them go, but I think that if I had to guess, Mirez and Jinji will probably find another team to play with. They seem super hyper competitive, so hopefully that team will still be kind of pushing the boundaries. But Echo is this like love hate relationship that I have in the MDI, where it's like
Sure.
Echo does all the cool shit, like they are the super fun ones to watch, but also I want them to stop fucking winning. So yeah, I have a love hate relationship with them. What do you think about this?
Yeah, I mean, almost certainly caused by the Azalea controversy and him being removed from Echo and therefore consequently removed from any MDI group that has Echo in its name. I think this was just the catalyst for something that was probably larger than that, though. I mean, if you look at the way Mira's kind of talked about it, it seemed like part of this decision was also something that we talked about, the idea that they're doing both MDI and TGP in each season, which is a lot. These challenges, these tournaments take a lot out of the people that do them. They are incredibly intensive, and because they're doing both of these, they're happening very, very close to the end of the race. Like I believe MDI starts up here in just a few weeks,
Yeah.
and the race just ended. And so I think you get some of the people that are that are playing on this team that are both race to world first people and MDI keep pushing people, and they just really didn't want to do it. They or didn't think they could do it. They couldn't juggle all three of those things back to back to back. And then everything with Zelia happened. And I think my guess is the rest of the team had a conversation, and it was just easier to call it quits than it was, to attempt to find a healer to fill those shoes, for their team. I agree
Yeah.
with you. I think all the players will probably compete in something in some way, going into the future, but it will not be under Team Echo, which is just kind of crazy. Yeah.
The thing that I was gonna say is now is the only one that I feel like that was on this team that was like fine not being on the team. He seems like he really wants to pivot more into like streaming and stuff like that, which
Yeah.
is why I was a little bit shocked he came back for the Race to World First to fill Andy's spot, but also extraneous circumstances, you know.
Yeah.
So
That was a favor. They needed help. He's the type of guy that's gonna step in and help if a team needs it. And so that's
mhm.
what he did. But yeah, I don't see him like my experience watching him do the Race to World First was not, oh man, this has reignited a passion in me to do this more. I'm gonna be a world first raider again. No, it was a one and done situation. I don't think he'll
Yeah.
be doing this again.
Um
So yeah.
the other all of that aside though, if Echo doesn't come back, if there isn't a Gingy and Mira's team, do we think mandatory is just going to become the next Echo?
Yeah. Oh, 100%. They are in many respects like better than Echo in some areas, and they and like tied with Echo in other areas. So I think so. I mean, it is a bummer, but it also is kind of really exciting because I think mandatory is good, but they are beatable. And they
Mhm.
like the thing about Echo in these tournaments, if you go back and watch the tournaments from the last few years, is not only are they like the best, but they also just feel like they have plot armor. Like they feel like anytime Echo is in a situation where they might lose, like some crazy shit happens, and then they pull victory from the jaws of defeat. Like it is wild, and no team quite has that in the same way that Echo does. So like them not existing anymore opens up the door for a lot of other teams. Like yes, mandatory becomes the presumptive favorites for sure, but it gives opportunity for a lot of other teams like Dorky's team and like some of the other teams to maybe make a real run for it, and
Yeah.
that's pretty exciting.
Well, I'm looking forward to seeing what the MDI has to offer us. I am a little bit worried that the quality of the MDI is going to go down. We've already talked about this, so I don't really want to like hammer that in too hard. But
Hmm.
I am looking forward to the MDI. And I do think that I was listening to Growl talk about it today. And it sounds like, from kind of like an insider perspective, I guess, people are still planning to do like 12 hours a day practicing for the MDI and stuff like that. So I imagine there's still going to be ridiculous stuff. We're having a conversation today. I want to get your thoughts on this. In Grimba Toll, when you get on the dragons at the beginning,
Hmm.
I don't know if you kill the mobs with the dragons, if it does. Yeah, I'm assuming it doesn't give you count, but if you leave them alive, does it give you count?
Hmm. I
Because
don't know.
if it does, is the play your tank just runs and grabs all of them, that entire hallway leading up to the first boss in the MDI, and then the rest of your group gets on the dragons and just like guns them down, and then the tank like finishes them off right at the end.
That's that's insane. There's no way. There's no way that works that way. I've never actually paid attention to count on that portion of the dungeon. So I don't know. You ran 2 today. Did you see count go up?
I didn't. I don't
Okay, the
tank. I
next
don't pay
time I do
attention
a
to
Grim
count.
Patrol, I will pay attention to this and we will figure it out.
Because that would be wild, wouldn't it? Just
Yeah.
like the entire like leading up to the first boss and then just blasting it with the dragons. It'd be
Hmm.
insane.
Yeah.
But to jump into the main segments, season 1 has been a love-hate relationship for me right now. The first thing I want to start us off with, and this is before we get into anything else about this, is I think that we need a perspective check on this because I have talked to so many people and the like frustration and everything else around this. Just like, I think people think we are further along in the season than we are.
Hmm.
We just finished week 2 of the season, week 2 of being able to do Mythic Plus. We are on week 3. Like, doing all 10s on week 2 is the equivalent of doing all 20s on week 2 of any other previous season, which like might not be astronomical for a lot of players, but like we do need to just make sure that that is kept into perspective here. And honestly, in some ways, it's harder than doing a 20 of any previous season because you have both fortified and tyrannical.
Yeah.
So it's just the perspective thing needs, I think, a little fixing.
It's so funny because I knew like theoretically about the tyrannical and fortified thing happening at +10, but I don't think I ever stopped and thought about, like, I knew that affected the difficulty of the pulls and the bosses. I never stopped to think about what that does to the timer. Because yeah, like, here's the thing, when you're on a tyrannical key, you're like, okay, well, the trash is going to die like really fast though, so we'll like hyper speed through the trash and then the bosses will take longer and then they'll be fine. It's like, wait a minute, both, you have the same amount of time, but now you have both trash with a shit ton more hit points and the bosses that are going to take forever, and you have the same amount of time and you have this plus 50 minus 15 seconds affix. So, I mean, putting aside just the general difficulty of fighting the stuff, the timers in every one of these dungeons are very tight. They are very tight. There is very little room. Like we did a stone vault last night. Like as like a it was like a late night, just get our weekly 10 in for vault, and I pulled that thing extremely conservative, and we had one wipe on a boss, just because we fucked up and had a wipe. Um, and we were like 11 minutes over, something like that, 10 minutes over. And so that's like one wipe and maybe a couple deaths here or there, and pulling perhaps a little bit more conservatively. But also, I feel like you have to pull conservatively in these dungeons. So really, like, the pulling portion of it was definitely part of why we were slower, but not like a huge part of it. So, man, yeah, it's just these are hard, and I agree with you. I agree with you. There is a lot of people in this game are very used to, especially since they've added this crest and upgrade system. They are very, very used to advancing very quickly up the ladder of both gear and of keys. Especially season 3, I think, had the easiest to time 20s in perhaps the history of the game. Getting your portals in season 3 was not hard at all. A lot of people, I think us included, got them in week 2. Maybe not week 2, maybe week 3, somewhere around there. And it was not particularly challenging to do that. And that's not the case. And then it's probably not fair to expect that to be the case, but that is some level setting. We're going to have to come to terms with this new reality for sure.
Yeah. The other thing to remember is it is season 1 of a new expansion too.
Yeah.
Like we are the weakest in comparison to a season starting that we are going to be in this expansion,
For sure.
unless
Yeah.
they do something wild. But like, we will never be more comparatively weaker than we currently are starting out in Mythic Plus. Just another thing to keep in mind.
Yeah. And the biggest thing about this is gilded crests do not start dropping until a +9, right? In season 2 of Dragonflight, season 3 of Dragonflight, you timed to 16, you got 12 gilded crests.
Mhm.
And timing right now, if we could walk into a +6 right now and get gilded crests, our item level would be considerably higher than it is. I think I'm at like 616 right now. I could be higher. I need to get my weapon crafted. I need just like a few more gilded crests to get a weapon crafted, which will bump my item level up pretty considerably. But like a lot of people that we play with are hovering at around like the 619 mark, because that's the point in which you can stop using the, I forget the names, the 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 heroic tier crest. That's the point in which everything is upgraded to that point where you no longer need those, and then you move on to the gilded ones, and that's where everyone's kind of hard stuck. And that's still a considerable amount of item level gain that we need to get, like from 619 to probably by the end of the season we're going to be in the 630s.
Mhm.
That's a lot of item level, and it's item level that was easier to get before. Like it was never hard. Well, I won't say never. It farming 16s, the equivalent of 6 nows for the best crests in the game, was never something that was that particularly difficult for people. Especially even like week 1. Like that's just what people did. I mean, heck, like that's kind of what you had to do to get KSM. You definitely don't have to do that anymore. So that is
Yeah.
a big change. That is a big change that I think we talked about a little bit when we first heard about it. We didn't like it when we heard about it. I see why they're doing it. But I think the problem is they've established something different. So a lot of players are like, I can't get my gilded crest. What the fuck? And that's resulting in a lot of people really frustrated going into +9s and being really, really frustrated, especially with the, you don't time it, you get less than half of the amount that you normally would. People are really feeling that for sure.
Yeah, especially with people also not sticking around. Like,
Yeah.
I spent this is gonna sound so stupid, but I spent 3.5 hours yesterday. We raided yesterday, and I just wanted to get one. I needed one gilded crest to finish off my craft. I spent 3.5 hours and didn't get a gilded crest. I did, I think, three attempted Grimbatols, or two Grimbatols, a Dawnbreaker, and all of those, the tank would like overpull trash and we'd die. Which, like, I mean, it happens. It's not a problem. And then we did a mists, and I was like, surely we can't mess up a 9 mists.
Mhm.
Well, I was wrong.
Wrong.
We messed up a 9 mists. And so I spent 3.5 hours and I didn't get a single gilded crest. Like, we didn't complete a dungeon, and it was miserable. Like, and then that's when I was like, I was so upset going into raid last night that, like, this is where this whole disclaimer is coming from. Like, I legitimately had to sit down at the end of the night and just like put everything into perspective of like, this is new content for a lot of people. This is the equivalent of a 19. Things are just generally harder because we are weaker right now. So again, that's where all of this disclaimer is coming from, is just like, have a little bit more leniency on yourself and the people you're playing with, because it is only just now beginning week 3, and just remember that. Really, that's the only thing.
Yeah. No, I agree. It is an important lesson, and I think we should all listen to it, myself included. Um, it's just a change. We had a certain expectation for how this game was played and how these systems worked and how all this stuff came together, and it's different now. Yeah, I mean, I haven't like just by myself pugged very much this season at all. Um, but from what I'm hearing, it's just it's the worst it's ever been. It's like
Mhm.
it's bad. The pug scene is bad out there, especially if you're a DPS. Like one thing I did do yesterday was I just like brought up the looking for dungeons window, and I just typed in all the groups that I filtered it for a full group, 3 DPS and a healer, and just like saw how many keys were out there just waiting for a tank, and it's an insane amount of keys. It's so many. There are just not very many tanks playing the game right now. And I kind of get that, because one of my frustrations with keys has been, I feel like I am getting fucking trucked. Like the jump from doing a 6 or a 7 or an 8 to like a 9 or a 10 is massive. And I'm not just
Mhm.
talking about because fortified or tyrannical is at it. It just feels like everything's doing so much. And this is honestly what's happening, Tevin, is exactly what we talked about, but it's a harder lesson to learn than you realize. It's they don't want you to pull more than one pack. That's the truth. That we said it. We said it months ago. And yet when you get into the key, you get into the mindset of it's timed. I need to pull big and pull aggressively, and the game kind of beats you back when you do that. It says nah, no. And it feels so weird. It is such a difficult thing for me to pull one pack and then just go, okay, I got 3 mobs here, that's it, I'm gonna stop now. And I was like, but I don't want to stop, I want to go more, I need more, there needs to be more in here. It's really really hard. But yeah, I mean, it feels like tanks are getting smacked around, and I know that'll get better with gear as well, and then also just skill and practice with the dungeons, and knowing exactly what needs to be interrupted, and knowing which you can pull together, and yada yada yada. But yeah, I mean, there's not a lot of tanks out there, there's not a lot of healers out there. Both specs are being tried very very difficultly in this season, and it is resulting in a lot of people just saying they don't want to do it. And that's a I like here's the thing. That's a problem. If people
Mhm.
are not participating in the system and it's causing this bottleneck, that's a problem. But at the same time, I don't want to say just blanketly that these things being hard right now is a problem. Like I don't think I think that. I think it's fine. I think it's difficult, and it's going to take some getting used to. And players like you and me are just going to be like, okay, we're going to have to change things up a little bit. We're going to have to level set expectations. We're going to have to maybe look at how we approach the dungeons a little bit differently, and figure that stuff out. But we are the type of players that would do that. There's players out there that are just going to nope out of the system. They're just be like, I don't want to do this anymore. Especially,
Mhm.
I've been seeing a lot of things on Reddit about like how awesome delves are and how great it is to gear from delves. And like people just, all these potential Mythic Plus people are just like, I don't have to do this anymore. And I'm just like, why do you play this game if all you're going to do is delves? I don't
Yeah.
get it.
So I was curious. So I just pulled up Raider.io and I was looking. So we have not timed a 10. Just to put that out there blanketedly. We have attempted, or we've done pretty much like no lever keys. I don't even know that I've legitimately attempted to time a 10 yet. But the highest key in the world ever completed yet is a 14 Arakara. And then that there are no other 14s. There is one 14, and then there are 63 13s in the world. And then it goes to 12.
Mm-hmm.
Like we are like 3 key levels below the highest keys being done in the world. Like
Yeah.
that's another thing to put into perspective.
Yeah.
Like if
No,
you are
you're
doing
right.
9s and 10s, you are very, 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 very high up right now.
Yeah, it makes me wonder what the key level breakpoint is going to be for title in this season.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's going to be higher than 9s or 10s, obviously, but it might just be a little like 13s. It literally might just be 13s, 14s, and the highest keys in the world are like 17s and 18s.
Mm-hmm.
Which, yeah, I mean, I guess that's not too different from the way season 4 ended up working out, but it does feel weird, and it is difficult to remember that for sure. And I guess, I mean, this is perhaps what Blizzard wants, right? This is what they want. They want that. That's part of the reason why they did the squish. They're obviously designing these things to be more difficult. They don't want keys to grow as aggressively as they did. They don't want a journey to max keys being from 2 to 31. They don't want that.
Mm-hmm.
But it does feel weird for sure.
Uh, so the next thing I kind of want to talk about is actually from a comment on our last video.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we had, uh, I'm gonna probably butcher this name, but I think it's Eriki or something like that, 9074. Um, and they said for the interrupt versus stop problem, which we talked about in our last episode, and I kind of want to hit on a little bit today. Um, but they suggest they could just make it so that your interrupt cooldown is refunded if your interrupt is used shortly after someone else's interrupt is successful or a stop has happened, say like 1 second. And the way that this would work is they would apply a 1 second debuff whenever a mob's cast is stopped. And then if you use your interrupt in that window, it would refund it. It would check if they have the debuff, and if they do, it would refund your cast of your interrupt. And they said that that would solve the solution or the issue that you brought up last week of like people just macroing their kick to everything, because if you kicked and it didn't have the debuff, then your kick would still go on cooldown, um, which I thought was super interesting. And I think that if implemented correctly, that could be a cool way to do this. I do personally, however, and maybe it's a skill issue. Maybe it's just something I need to get better at, and I'll get better at, and I won't ever talk about it again. But I think something needs to give with this whole stops thing. Like stopping a cast just for the thing to cast it again. And now, like, let's look at the things that are popular this season, right? Like, we have warlocks, which their main stop is a stun. We have shamans, which their main stop is a stun that casts twice, so twice the DR.
Mhm.
We have warriors, their main stop is a stun. So like you're DRing these mobs so quickly that like even to just fill the gaps in between your kicks is just becoming difficult. So I kind of wanted to get your thoughts on what you thought about this guy's comment, and go from there.
Yeah, I think first the comment. I love that idea. I think that's a very clever idea. Um, to solve the problem. I guess the only problem with it, and I don't even know if this is really a problem, but is that is a thing that is difficult to teach people. But I mean, I think the game has so many other things that are difficult to teach people that they that they put in the game anyway. So you just got to figure it out. But no, I think that's a very elegant way of solving the problem. The exact problem that I pointed out last week, which is that you you kick right after someone else is kicked or right after someone else is stunned, and the mob will recast, but now your kick's on cooldown, and so you've literally just completely wasted it. That would save you from that. I think that's good. I mean, I think this is the okay. I don't know if they would consider this the problem or not. Like I was listening to I forget which podcast. It was one of the is the bench, the podcast that Growls on. I was listening to that this morning, and they were talking about how I think they were talking about how Blizzard wants you to be social in their game. They want you like the idea of pugging is great. And people do it all the time, and the system should allow you to do that. But in Blizzard's ultimate world, you pug to meet people and then eventually form a guild or a group of people that you know, or whatever, a team, whatever. And so like the idea that we need to change the systems up because it's too difficult to do these things in an uncoordinated group that is not in voice comms with each other. I wonder if Blizzard's like, yeah, we're fine with that because that's
Mhm.
what we want you to do. We don't want 5 people that are just randomly pugging to do a 12 without voice comms or without any kind of coordination. Coordination is part of the difficulty of the high keys, and that's true. It is, but we're fine with it the way it is. So perhaps part of the reason why they've made this change and are sticking to this change and might not make a change like this listener suggested is because they want you to have to figure that shit out on your own, and they don't want to make systems help you with it. Um,
Mhm.
I don't love that reasoning or excuse because I still think even in a coordinated group, like shit happens. And like
Yeah.
we've talked about, being like the shot caller or the coordinator for the group is insanely difficult. It is one of the most challenging things to do in the game, while also having to do all the stuff that everyone else has to do. It's really hard.
Mm.
So the idea that this is something that should be expected on I guess the ultimate question is like, what is the correct level of keys in which it's okay for that to be the expectation on? And I don't know the answer to that question, but um, I think they want you to fuck up your kick, I guess is the ultimate thing. But speaking to the change generally, I hate it. I do not like it. I don't see the need for it. I think it band-aid solves a problem that they could have solved by just overall reducing the number of stops in the game and subsequently reducing the number of casts in the game. It feels really bad to gather mobs now, um, unless you are a class that is like particularly good at gripping mobs in DK. There's a reason why the most tanks that have timed tens and higher is DKs right now. There's a reason for that, because like you'll stop a mob and then it'll just stand there and start casting again, right? And it's just like it's so much, mob control is so much more difficult with this than it used to be. Like there are just mobs that they just refuse to clump, they just refuse to do it, and it's very, very frustrating.
Yeah, it's been awful. I really think I hope and I pray that something is going to be done about this in season 2. Um I have low expectations that something's going to be done about it, but I hope that there's enough data and enough feedback around this that something will be done in season 2. Um I don't know. Honestly, at this point, like I would almost rather them just revert the change and go back to the drawing board and then come back to us with something new, you know?
Yeah.
Um
Yeah, like I don't know, man. Maybe the reason why Demon Hunter was the most powerful tank for 2 seasons was because you gave it the best stops in the world, not just because stops as interrupts was a flawed system, but because you gave it the most absurd amount of stops ever, that they could single-handedly lock down the mob for 3 minutes. Maybe that was the problem, not stops. I don't know. Call me crazy.
I completely agree. I am honestly, it's a little sad that like if we were to think back on it, Demon Hunter probably doesn't even seem that busted right now. Like
Hmm.
if the old Demon Hunter implementation was in the game right now, like they still get double silence. That's kind of strong. But other than that, it's like chains, but the fear sigil doesn't really work anymore. I
Hmm.
mean, it'll stop the cast, but they'll just recast it. So I don't know. Something to think about. I love this suggestion from the listener. So thank you for that.
Hmm.
Um, maybe they'll implement something like that. And if
Yeah.
so, then that'd be awesome. But
Also, give Holy and Disc Priest a kick, like
thank
especially under
please.
especially under this new system. Like before, you could at least argue maybe Psychic Scream counted as a shitty kick for them because it would at least interrupt shit. Now they literally have no way of interrupting anything ever. Um, that's awful. If you're gonna stick with this, every class should have a kick. And maybe I don't know. Like I'm not saying we need to like make it uniform and every kick has the same recast. I'm kind of okay with certain classes having better ones than other. I'm kind of okay with the melee kick generally be having a faster recast time than like a ranged kick, but there's such a wide margin of recast for this stuff that it's kind of ridiculous. Then you have things like Poor Boomkin that have a very, very good interrupt, but on such a ridiculous cooldown that it's it's like, okay, I can help out once every 2 packs. No, three, 4 I don't know. It just it's yeah, it's not great. I don't know.
Well,
They need to look at all of this stuff. They really do.
yeah. It's just something we'll see what happens, I guess.
Hmm.
Like I said, I pray and I hope that something in season 2 changes, but again, I don't have high expectations that anything will change probably until a season 4 or a
Yeah.
next expansion, which is kind of sad.
So I mean, I guess like despite all that we've talked about with like design philosophy and what they want to do, the big thing is going to be how many people are participating in this system. And
Yeah.
if they are seeing their numbers go considerably lower than they were in previous seasons, they will make changes. They will shift stuff
Mm.
around, whether that's just to make things generally easier, whether that's to change their philosophy on stops and interrupts, whatever. I haven't been looking at those numbers to see like what is the participation rate of the season so far, but I have a feeling it's lower, um, than It's tough to say if it's lower than like season 3 Dragonflight, because like I feel like season 1 is always going to, the first season of an expansion is always going to probably have the highest numbers,
Yep.
because people are coming back to the expansion to try it out. But I don't know. We'll see. I want to see if I can find these numbers and see how things are going.
Sure. We can definitely circle back on that on a
Yeah.
future episode.
Yeah.
Um, I guess the next thing that has kind of been making season one a bit jarring is we've stated this before. Um, and I don't know that we really knew how this was going to impact us. But the 15-second death penalty in sevens and higher is it's brutal. We said it before that it was brutal, but like it is it is brutal.
Hmm.
It's rough. I mean, when we were talking about it before, every time we've talked about this, it was like, well, if you wipe, that's a minute and a half off your key, and then you got to run back, and da, 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 da. But like, nobody just thinks about like the random deaths during the dungeon.
Yeah.
Like, you're fucking bringing in a hunter who is just running through the dungeon, standing in everything, yada yada yada. And by the time you get to the final boss, they've racked up like 8 deaths. And like that's a lot of time just
Yeah.
off your key. It's brutal.
Yeah. I mean, and this is a question I asked at the very beginning of this podcast we had, and I'll bring it back again. Like the fundamental question with this stuff becomes, at what level is it appropriate for a death to potentially break your key? And by putting this affix at a 7, they've essentially answered that question with a 7. Because
Mhm.
I mean, I think you're right. Yes, there is an argument that if you wipe in a key that's a high level key, you should just lose. Like that a high level key will not tolerate a wipe. That makes sense to me. I don't know if I agree. I wish there was a little bit more cushion for that, but whatever. But yeah, what we're talking about here is the one-off shit that happens is guy number 1 loses focus for 5 seconds and steps in a swirly and dies. Guy number 2 messes up a mechanic, or hell, there's just like bad luck where a mob targets this, like multiple casters target the same person and get cast off at the same time. And these are the casts you're not supposed to kick. These are the casts you're supposed to let out because you have to save your shit for the really important stuff, but which we talked about last week. But like they just happen to target the same person instead of targeting different people, and so that person dies. Like, these are things that happen all the time, especially as you get in high fortified keys with trash that really 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 hurts. This stuff happens. It does. It happens in the best teams sometimes. And those, yeah, they add up so quickly. When timing a key with a lot of time left is like having 90 seconds left on the timer, it's like, oh yeah, we easily timed that with 90 seconds left. And then suddenly you take 5 deaths that normally would have been 25 seconds and make those make those 5 deaths 75 seconds, and you're like, well, wait a minute here, wait a minute, that's not easily timed anymore. Yeah, I think we said this was going to be bad. I definitely think we underestimated how bad it's going to be, especially in the pug environment. It is
Mhm.
brutal, and it is a fundamental shift going from a 6 to a 7. It changes the game so fundamentally that I wonder if it's the right choice and the right key level for it. I don't know.
In my experience with pugging so far this expansion, and like I haven't done a ton of it. I try to do as much as I can with guildies. Um, if somebody dies in a pug at this point, like it's a pretty big toss up whether somebody's just gonna leave or not. Because
Hmm.
like it one death is essentially somebody dying 3 times in the system
Yeah.
previously. And that is it's just a hard pill to swallow. Like if somebody's gonna die to something stupid, before it was like, oh, well, they died to something stupid, whatever, we'll keep going. That's not gonna be a problem. But now it's like, oh, they died to something stupid and they just cost us a fourth of a minute. Like
Hmm.
it's just not. It's not the same. I think it is causing groups to disband more frequently on top of the difficulty. Um, but I think the next thing, kind of like segueing, is I just a general question for you. Um, and I think that there's two real ways to look at this. Are dungeons, like, dungeons are just straight up hard right now.
Hmm.
And that was from, week 1 and week 2. I've done stuff today. Today seems way more chill than the last 2 weeks, I will say that much. Um, but I've done stuff today, or the past 2 weeks, and they just seem really hard. Uh, and it makes me wonder, like, are these cranked up for the Race to World First to kind of, like, slow down the progression of the Race to World First guilds as well? Because we know the raid is, right? Like, the raid very clearly is geared for the Race to World First and trying to just, like, kind of stem the rate at which they're getting gear. The other way to view this, though, is like Blizzard's tied up with the race. They've got to fix bugs there. Like, that needs to be their top priority, and they're just not getting to keys yet. I could honestly, at this point, I could see arguments for either way. What's your thought on this?
I would be so mad if that were the truth. I would be so mad. I don't think so, because I think even with keys like they are right now, the best players in the world were easily doing 9s and 10s like week 1. That's just the way, like, they're the best players in the world for a reason. They're very,
Yeah,
very good, and they can handle the stuff even at low item level. So did they tune them that way specifically for the race? Probably not. I mean, I wouldn't hold it past them, but probably not. I think Blizzard's approach to this stuff is always like, they are terrified that they're going to tune things too easy, because
yeah,
they know that if we start out too easy, we're just going to freaking, like, just hemorrhage players, like, that as much as people don't want to admit it, the second you stop having a progression path, the second you don't need any more gear, the second you've beaten things on the highest level, which for a lot of people is just get portals, for some people is just Keystone Master, some people it's get portals, whatever. The second you do that, people start leaving the game. They know this. They don't want people to do that. And so in their mind, it is a much, much, much more desirable thing to overtune and then slowly roll back than it ever is to undertune, because
mhm,
they won't ever buff things. Like, I just don't think they will. Not in a system where score is calculated, and therefore you're telling people if you played the first 2 weeks you get a chance at good score, but if you played now you're fucked. Sorry. They will never do that. And so they're just always going to go into these things overtuning a little bit, and then sometimes they miss the boat on exactly how overtuned things were. There's some stuff that I just want to be like, how could you not have tested this? Like, some of those weird overlaps we talked about next week is like, surely the data showed you that and you just decided
yeah,
to do nothing about it. But this is their philosophy. This is what they do now. And so I think things are always going to be rough, especially, we talked about the success of the rotating dungeon pool, but now every season is like a new expansion for this, where they have to tune things very specifically and then kind of use live testing as a way of appropriately tuning things down. It's frustrating. It's frustrating to play knowing that, like, just kind of waiting to see. It's like, okay, surely there's going to be some nerfs next week. What are they going to be? And it's also like, as a player, sometimes it's really frustrating, like, that that there probably are some things in these dungeons that are overtuned, but you don't know which are the things that are overtuned and which aren't. So
yep,
it's like you're dying against this stuff and you're like, okay, am I just fucking up? Is this a me problem, or is this the game is just unfair right now? And it's
yep,
really difficult to tell that, because, like, I looked at the tuning that happened today, and it's like, okay, Grimbatol took a lot of nerfs. It's like, yes, that was like it was vindication to feel that when I was struggling Grimbatol, like, something was a little bit unfair there. Okay, that's good. But then, like, I am struggling mightily in Necrotic Wake. I am having a lot of problems in Necrotic Wake, and not just the third boss, which is awful, yes, but like the trash on a fortified key in Necrotic Wake is fucking annihilating me. And so like right now I'm like, they didn't do anything to that trash. So I'm like, oh, I think that's perhaps just a me problem then. Maybe I just need to play the game better. And just being in the situation where you just don't know is really frustrating at times. And that's what the idea of overtuning introduces into the game, is this uncertainty and doubt around these things. And
Yep.
I find that really frustrating, and I know a lot of players do as well.
I do want to kind of circle back to the first thing that you were talking about, because I was watching Growl's stream today, and he had a very good explanation to this, just like in general for like, I guess, layman terms. Um, so when you first start out, right? Like, so essentially his argument was like, not everybody plays the game to be the master of one class.
Mm-hmm.
They play the game because like starting a new class, a new character, you are you're getting compound like progression, right? You're not only getting better in understanding your skills and your skill set, but you're also getting better and better gear. And at some point, the gear stops, but you learning more and more and more about how to optimize things can keep going beyond that
Mm-hmm.
point. And a lot of people will stop where the gear caps and they don't continue to go beyond. It's the people who go beyond are the ones that are doing like um, race to world first, or potentially getting title or MDI. Um, but that just isn't for everybody. And the
Yeah.
amount of time and the amount of reps that it takes to really get that can be really repetitive for players. So I think what Blizzard's attempt to do with this whole system and the way that they've changed crests is really exactly what you were saying, where it's like they want to give players the feeling that they are still progressing for a longer period of time, which increases their retention and increases the amount of players still doing Mythic Plus into later parts of the season, right?
Mm-hmm.
I really truly believe that that's probably what they're trying to do here.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that fosters a healthier, better player base overall. Like when people, it just makes people better at the game. Possibly. I guess the question I have is like, does does Blizzard's development strategy require people to be good at the game? And I don't even know if that's true. I don't think, I don't know, or rather I think I don't know if they care ultimately,
Yeah.
if what the average skill level of, like, there's like World of Warcraft is notorious like in the gaming community of having like some of the worst players ever, right? That there are people that play this game that are just absolutely horrendous at this game. And it's because for the longest time, to like, and especially in Dragonflight, to get like the top gear. Like, remember there was a point in Dragonflight in season 2 and season 3 where like you just stopped looking at item level because like item
Mm,
level didn't tell you anything about it. Like there was up at certain points in this game, like item level was a fairly good indication of skill. Not totally, right? Like ever since the invention of gear score, there's always been people saying like gear score tells you nothing, it tells you nothing, like they're totally terrible players with good gear score. That this is all true, but you know, if you're getting up there to high item levels, there's some level of competence assumed.
yep.
But in some of these new system changes, like it's so easy to get gear, it's so easy to get close to max item level, though that stops telling you anything about anyone ever. Um, and maybe they're wanting to get back to that point where like if you want your to get your gear above 619, you're either going to have to be pretty good at this game, or you're just going to have to do a lot of untimed nines, like
Yeah.
a whole bunch of untimed nines. um which I think people will do. There will be people that will do that, and they will have really high gear and not be that good, but that'll take a lot longer than the majority of people. So I don't
Mhm.
remember what I was talking about, but I lost my way during the middle of this conversation. But um, yeah, I mean, I think again, I'll go back to the idea of like, well, let's see what the data says. Like, is this bringing more people to the game? Is it bringing more people to the system or not?
Yeah. Well, I have a couple more things that I want to talk about for Mythic Plus, and then I do want to touch a little bit on the raid and the race.
Hmm.
Um, so the first thing is for for me at least so far in the expansion, it's been rough to kind of get a group together. And I think that it's a lot of kind of what I was saying initially with like people are being really hard on themselves, and really hard on others as well. When we look at perspectives, um, and I'm hopeful that this will blow over. Um, I did just kind of want to put it out there because I feel like I have just seen video after video after video after video of like pugging's awful, pugging's terrible, pugging's in this awful state. You were talking about it earlier that pugging's like the worst it's ever been, but like why are all the content creators putting out videos about pugging when I know the majority of them have a 5 man to play with? I wonder if they're having the same struggle, like of people just getting like super annoyed at having higher expectations for themselves than they feel like they're able to achieve right now. Um, yeah, I don't know. I don't know if that's kind of like this ugly feedback loop into itself right now, but it is like I think I've seen, I shit you not, like 4 videos about how terrible pugging is in the past week.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I mean, I think the honest truth is that a lot of people that play this game want the game to be pretty easy. I mean, what they really want is like a chill, casual, no stress way to get gear and play.
mhm.
And I think the majority of people do not want to need to do difficult dungeons in order to get their gilded crests. They don't want that. And so they're either just separating themselves from the system and just saying, okay, I guess I just won't engage with this at all, or they're just very, very frustrated. They're pissed off. They have low patience. They have low tolerance. It's like imagine a version of yourself that did that 3.5 hour key session, but that was like you didn't have anyone else to play with, and that was like all you had. And then like eventually you would probably get to the point too where you're like, if one person dies, you're just like, fuck this, I'm just
Yeah.
this is not happening again, fuck this, I'm out. um I have a lot of sympathy for that. And yeah, I mean, I agree with everything you've said, that we need to level set our expectations, we need to have patience, we need to step back and think and look at this. But yeah, I can also very much see people at a level of frustration they just didn't really anticipate.
Yeah, that's completely fair too. I mean, we all of us, right, are limited in the amount of time that we can spend playing the game.
Yeah.
Um, so getting the most out of your time is always something that you want to maximize. So I do think, moving on a little bit, to jump into raid a little, I
Sure.
have one thing that is a little bit of a segue. So I guess I'm just going to kind of push that off for now because I think the main thing that I really want to touch on right now is kind of like where um where the race to world first kind of landed. So
Mm-hmm.
um Liquid did claim world first Ansarek.
Woo woo!
So USA, USA, USA.
God
Uh
bless America.
but I do think it's interesting. It's very interesting because there were at points this race was super tight. And like Liquid was like steamrolling just throughout the entire raid. And then we got to like Kaiveza, and we got to Brood Twister and Court and Ansarek. And while Liquid did kill those bosses before anybody else, and some of them significantly before anybody else, it like it all culminated to like now we're on court and it's like Liquid's pulling the boss, Echo's pulling the boss, Method's pulling the boss. They're all within like 10% of each other. And just like it always amazes me how we get to this point of like all of the top guilds kind of collectively get to the same point of progression. And then it just takes like that one innovation, and then they start pulling ahead again. And
Mm-hmm.
then everybody else starts adapting or making their own innovation, and then they start pulling ahead again. So it was really interesting. Again, this wasn't the closest race we've ever seen. You know, this wasn't Farak levels of closeness, uh,
No,
but it was a good race, I think.
it was a good race. I think Liquid freaking bodied everyone else in this race, though. Like I like it's pretty incredible, actually. Like if you look at progression on Ansarek and how like you just like because I was busy during a lot. I've been very, very busy in my life, so I did not get to watch this race to World First near as much as I normally do. But I'd go to sleep knowing that Liquid was at a certain percent and Echo was at another percent, and I would expect to wake up in the morning and see Echo while Liquid was sleeping has overtaken them, and now Liquid's going to be playing from behind and have to catch up. And then I would wake up and I would see Echo basically at the same spot they were at before, and Liquid gets on and they just have a progression day that is just chipping away at the boss, just chipping away percent by percent, little by little, and for Echo and Method, nothing's moving. They're not making any progress, and yet Liquid is just slowly chipping away at it. I think they played their fucking minds out in this tier. Like, so here's the thing. It's really interesting to look at the fact that in the past 8 races, it's tied. Liquid has won 4, Echo has won 4. That's awesome, and I love it. But the most recent Liquid win after this one was Aberrus and was Sarkareth, which was, you saw them kill that boss relatively quickly. And you saw a lot of complaints come out of at the end of that race that was, global release, Liquid has the edge, it's unfair. Like, you saw a lot of that stuff come out of that race. And that was because that was a relatively easy raid tier. That was a relatively easy final boss. And Liquid earned their win and they should be proud of that. But there's always going to be this placed asterisk next to it by other people. This one though, man, no. Like, this one was probably arguably one of, if not the hardest raid tier in the history of this game.
Yep.
I mean, by pull count, it doesn't quite get there. I think there's a couple raids that have a few more pulls than this. Sepulchre, the first ones, infamously being one of them. But this was an incredibly difficult raid. There's people saying that Ansarek goes down as probably one of the hardest final bosses ever. And they just outplayed everyone. They just did. They just dominated. And so, yeah, I mean, you're right. It was a close race. It was a fun race. It's true that we always get down to these bosses where everyone's on the same boss at the same time, and that makes it fun. And I'm glad that happens. But man, like, this is dominant show by Liquid for sure.
Yeah, I think when Liquid killed the boss, Echo's best pull was something like 15%.
Yeah.
Like 15% isn't an unreasonable amount of damage to find, right? Like Liquid found, I think it was like 23% the first time they hit Enrage or something like that. Something astronomical.
Yeah.
Maybe that was their 10% pull. I don't remember. But it's a lot. Like 10% on this boss is a lot.
Yeah.
Especially when you are limited to when you can deal damage to the boss, right?
Mm-hmm.
There is a burn. So you have all of phase 1. There's a mini burn phase in phase 1. And then there is like an even tinier window at the end of phase 1. And then there's no boss damage in phase 2.
Yeah.
And then you get to phase 3 and you have like 30 seconds of a burn phase. And then essentially very little boss damage going out the rest of phase 3 because all of the mechanics and just everything that's going on is like you're just slowly bringing the boss's health down. And then you get past this like fucking insane mechanic, if we're just going to call it that, where there's 5 of the fucking ads that drop the things and all of them need to be kicked, but a shield needs to be broken on them so that they can be kicked. And you still need boss damage because you can't make the fucking enrage if you don't have boss damage. And just like a wild overlap. But you're rewarded at the end of that. If you do all of that successfully, you are rewarded with like 40 to 45 seconds of nothing but just hitting the boss.
Yeah.
And
that's what they saved Lust for. And there's spyglass trinkets or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so like we're talking 3 times throughout the entire fight where you can actually contribute like meaningful damage to the boss.
Mm-hmm.
Like a significant portion of meaningful damage.
Yeah.
So it was an interesting boss as far as like cadence was concerned. You'd get past that final thing and then it'd be like between the time of the burn and the enrage, and the guilds are like at like 15 to 20%. You're like, Jesus Christ, there's still 15 to 20% on this boss, and there's like 40 seconds left in the fight. Like, what the hell is going on? And then they killed it. Like, I don't know. When they killed it, for those who don't know, there was a hot fix. It wasn't called out, but they increased the enrage like timer for Ansarek. Essentially, they just elongated the amount of time that the enrage like essentially took to cast to kill you, from 5 seconds to 15 seconds. Echo didn't even need, or Liquid didn't even need that when they killed the boss.
Hmm.
Like they would have killed the boss without that change,
Yeah, yeah.
which is wild, just absolutely wild.
They played their minds out, man. I like like just watching the fight, understanding the fight, and knowing what they need to do. It's just insane. And then you see things like the clip, like THD, like grabbing the essence right in time, like gating over to it, and then like it's just, like everyone played their minds out on that team. They should all be very proud of themselves. It was an incredible win. It'll go down as one of the best wins in Raced World First history. Like just so cool. So I mean,
Mhm.
and which is like not to say that Echo or Method should not be proud of themselves either. Like these were incredibly difficult bosses. These people are better than I could ever hope to be at this game. They're very, very good at it. And it's fun to watch them do the hardest stuff out there that we will never do, ever.
Another thing I want to talk to you about, Scott, is Method. Ever since the like breakup where like the majority of the raid team went to Echo, um, hasn't really been on my radar as like a guild to watch.
Mm-hmm.
And this race really brought them back on there. Like, so for example, I think Method got world second on like Jailer, and maybe another boss where
Yeah,
like,
but Liquid didn't play for a week. That's why they
right,
got world
exactly.
second.
That's what I was about to say. The other guild like saw that, either Echo or Liquid got first, and then they just kind of like were taking it casually after that. So Method has been up there, like they have consistently been second or third in the world to kill a boss. Um, but they weren't ever really on my race to world first radar until this raid. Like I actually, when I watch the race and everyone's live, I have a multi-stream going with like Liquid or Max's POV, the Echo POV, and then I added the Method POV this time because they were close.
Hmm.
Um, Unfortunately, they had hiccups with court, but Method really impressed me this tier. Coming back from their entire raid being banned for the first 2 days and like everything like that, it's super impressive that they got their world third kill only 2 hours after Echo got their world second kill,
Yeah.
which is super impressive. Just awesome.
Yeah, I mean, it's always been always for the last while. It's been Liquid and Echo playing for first, and then everyone else competing for third. And Method was kind of the presumptive winner of third place, um, and that didn't change this tier. But there were moments where you're like, oh, this. I mean, this could really be a foot race for first between three guilds. Like this could be, and I feel like if they can take that momentum and carry that into the next tier, then yeah, we might have a three guild race, which would be just excellent. I like nothing would make me happier. Nothing would be better for the race to world first than three guilds in close competition with each other.
Mhm.
It'd be really fun to see. It'd be fun to see, like, three minds are better than one. So getting these three guilds working on the same boss at the same time, stealing strategies from amongst themselves instead of just one stealing from the other, would make it more exciting. You probably see more interesting strats derive from that. I think it's all very cool. I hope they continue to do well. I think those are the only three guilds that have still killed it, right? I think there's the one Chinese guild is close, but not quite there yet.
Yeah, I haven't actually checked back in on it, but the last I checked, that is correct. It
Hmm.
was just those three. Um,
I just checked. Yep, it's just those three with
s-
the Chinese guild that I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce is at 2%.
okay. Well, I another question I had for you is obviously the race ended. The world first kills were claimed, and we saw sweeping nerfs come over Mythic, which is just something that we've come to expect at this point. Um, it's always been talked about in the past that like raids are tuned for race to world first, and then they get nerfed and everything else. And then on top of that, you get item levels. So like the relative difficulty of the raid comes down significantly from what we watched during this. But it it is weird to me, I think, even just a little bit, that it doesn't even feel hidden anymore. Like it was literally like the three guilds killed Kaveza and they killed Ovanax. And then like literally 2 days later, if that, it might have even been a day later, Mythic Ovanax, Mythic Kaveza changes. Huge nerfs to these bosses. Yeah, it doesn't even seem like it's Sly anymore. It's just like, oh, okay, race is done on those bosses. Let's nerf them, you know?
Yeah, I'm still struggling philosophically with this idea. I agree with you. It like they are not hiding anymore. Everyone knows this is how the game works now. We tune these bosses on release for 3 guilds now, and then as soon as those guilds kill it, we scale it back for the normies. Um, I hate it. So, okay, this is the conclusion I've come to. I hate this. I think this is ultimately bad for the game. As much as I love the race, and as much as I talked about last week, I completely understand how they're between a rock and a hard place. And if they make if they make the raid too easy, then the public perception will just be that this is an easy tier, despite the fact that the majority of players will never experience it on that difficulty level. Doesn't matter. It's irrelevant. People will think that anyway. But I just like I just hate I hate this. I hate it. I hate that we're designing fights for 60 people.
Mhm.
Like I hate it. It's stupid. And like there's a lot of things, we've talked on this podcast many times about the problems with Final Fantasy 14, of which there are many, and I think we'll agree with a lot of them. The one thing I do appreciate about that game is the rating scene. You just don't see very many nerfs. They released the fight and they've tested it extensively and they know if it's doable or not. And this is not always true. There's sometimes when they realize a DPS check is a little too tight and they scale it back a little bit. But for the most part, like, this is just the way it works. And their races are usually over within a couple days. They are. I mean, first of all, there's less bosses. There's only 4 bosses. And I just I just don't like it. I don't like this idea that depending on when you enter the instance, what day or what month after it's been released, you're going to experience a different fight than someone else. That like you need to that every Ansarek kill is going to have a qualifier next to it of okay, but like what day did you kill it? Because like if you killed it on October 1st, okay, you're still pretty good. But if you killed it on like November 30th, you suck. Like, so I hate it. I hate it.
Yeah. Uh I guess the other thing that I kind of want to talk about, and this is leaning more away from the raid, and kind of just away from the race, still in the raid vein. I kind of want to get your feelings since we both changed classes going into this season, which is not really anything new for either one of us. But you changed roles, so you might be impacted on this a bit more than me. But I am in a very weird kind of crisis right now where like all I used to care about before was I'm picking my class and what I like playing in Mythic Plus, and raid will just happen. And that's because I just went under the assumption of all I care about is getting AOTC, doing the raid to get my pieces that I need out of there, be it a weapon with a cantrip on it or trinkets or whatever. um and
Mm-hmm.
now that we're looking to do Mythic, I am in this very much so weird spot of like I love my warlock in raid, and I am trying to come around to it in Mythic Plus, but it's just not there for me. And I've never had this like struggle of like I need to find something that I like in both Mythic Plus and Raid, because it used to just be I'll play whatever in raid, and I'll be able to do the content, and it's not a problem.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I don't know. Are you running into any of that at all? I mean, Bear's just overwhelmingly pretty good right now, so maybe not. But
Yeah, I mean, I like the class. I like playing it. But I've always liked Druid, and I certainly think it's more fun to tank in Mythic Plus than it is in Raid. I think you just more to do, more is on you. I think the only exception to this is kind of Ansarek, which is pretty tight. Like the tank busters on Ansarek are brutal. Like both of them are brutal. Either you're taking the first hit that puts this giant dot on you, like that literally. I rip Incarn, and I just like, because I have the berserk talent that lets you cast um I don't even know name my abilities. The regen ability, like
frenzy regen,
it normally has 2 stacks, but under Incarn you just get it infinitely, and I just fucking spam the shit out of that because this dot ticks on me so bad. Or you're taking the second hit, which is even if you mitigate it like crazy, it still puts a giant heal absorb on you. And those are two very difficult mechanics. Both of them, they make the first phase very difficult for tanks, and that's fun. It's been fun, me and my co-tank kind of like trying to figure out the best way to approach these things, and what externals to ask for when, and things like that has been fun. But other than that, like especially in heroic, for the most part this raid has just kind of been like taunt taunt it back. Yeah, if there's a tank hit, just press a button and you'll be fine. And that's pretty much
yeah.
it. So it's not been the most fun. I definitely agree that I think it's weird to be thinking about raid as much. Like we are right now on the cusp of getting AOTC. We'll probably do it within the next week or so. And normally, what would happen then is we shift out of the raid mindset. You know, we'll go back and maybe do reclears, but that is usually pretty easy. And then our primary focus will shift to just doing Mythic Plus, and that's the season for us. But that's not going to be the case this time, hopefully. And it does make you kind of consider the raid a little bit differently, because normally, yeah, when I'm like fighting these bosses, like, well, this is going to get harder, but I don't have to worry about that, so I'm not even going to think about it. We did it, check, done. And
Yep.
that's not the case anymore for sure.
Yeah, yeah. It's just a weird spot to be in. And I'm sure a lot of other people who do Mythic and Mythic Plus or have been in this spot before. But it's just something I'm really kind of experiencing for the first time. Because in the past, when I wasn't really doing Mythic Plus, but I was still Mythic rating, it was the flip flop, right? Like I only really cared what things felt like in raid, and
Yeah.
whatever for Mythic Plus. And so it's weird to care about both.
I will say I have not missed healing in raid until Ansarek. Like I really like while we were progging on that fight last night, like I was just like, I really wish I was healing this raid, because I just like, there's moments where you feel I just like this part right here, I could like rip some fucking crazy heals if I timed things right, and you just really want that. That's like the only time in the raid I've really felt that so far.
Mhm.
But yeah, it's a good raid. I don't know.
Well, we do have plans, as we've already stated, if it isn't obvious, to be going into Mythic raid hopefully soon. And I think goals for the upcoming week, I don't know about you, but I'm going to be looking towards maybe trying to get some tens done, get my portals, maybe get Keystone Hero maybe by the end of the week. Um, and Mythic raid by the end of the month, maybe.
Sure. It's the first. It's the first of October. Let's say that. That's a good goal.
um, but there's been a lot that's been going into Mythic raid prep. Thankfully, we brought on another officer to help us out with a lot of the raid stuff, which
Who
has been super nice.
Yeah, who by the way is fucking killing it. Like just so that's put on the record. He knows who he is, but he's been killing it, and
He has been.
he should be very proud of himself for sure.
It's so nice and it's so refreshing to me for I didn't really raid lead in our previous guild, but I did, like, I felt an obligation to like make suggestions and try to optimize things where I could and really like speak up. and I have completely just washed my hands from raiding at all. And I am just like, I'm listening and I'm just dealing damage, and it's great. And it is the first time that I have raided in probably, I don't know, 6+ years that I have not had to think outside of my own personal shit to handle. And it is so absolutely refreshing. It's been awesome. But moving into Mythic, there is this whole other side of things that we're starting to learn, of like needing to dive into logs, see who's health potting, see who's combat potting, see who's taking avoidable damage, and really just kind of like dive into all of this stuff.
Hmm.
Um and I did that previously, but it didn't really matter. It was more so of like, okay, we're getting stonewalled on this boss. How can we improve? Let people know, like, here are the things that you need to do. But we're really trying to put a roster together right now. And so, like, it's getting to the point of like, we're needing to use these metrics on who we want to actually bring to Mythic. Um, and yeah, I don't know. It's weird to set up a Mythic roster for the first time, I guess, is the only thing to really say about it. Do you have any thoughts on this?
Um, yeah, I mean, I've never done this, so like, obviously never rated Mythic, so never had this experience whatsoever. It's fun while also being frustrating. Like, I have never been the type of player that like likes like looking shit up like this and like being like, hey, you're not pressing your shit that you should be. Like, I don't like that. I don't particularly like having to talk to people in our group and be like, "No, but seriously, you need to be hitting your buttons." I don't like the fact that we're probably going to get to a point where we have to have a serious conversation about like what the roster is going to look like and who is and isn't ready for this, myself included, by the way. I'm not leaving myself off of that consideration. Um, I don't like that because I like all the people we play with a lot, and it's a lot of fun, and I enjoy playing with them, and it's like this is kind of what it takes,
Yeah.
unfortunately. And I said I wanted that experience, and this is part of that experience, and so I'm just gonna have to deal with it. But yeah, I'm not the biggest fan of it. I wish it wasn't the case, but if it wasn't hard, then you wouldn't need to do this stuff. So
Hmm.
it kind
Yeah.
of is what it is. Yeah.
I think the weirdest part of it to me is like, it almost feels like trying to hold people accountable like you would at like a job.
Yeah.
Um, which is just, I don't know. It's weird in both a good and kind of satisfying way, because you know that the people who are there all have the same expectations
Yeah.
and everything, and the people who aren't like kind of meeting the expectations um know exactly, what they could be doing to improve. um but yeah, I think ultimately I 100% agree with you, where it's like it's not a fun spot to be in, but ultimately if everybody has the same kind of vision with like the betterment of the raid team in mind, it is something that just kind of needs to happen.
Yeah.
um yeah.
It's definitely a shift change because you're going from like people that obviously care about doing well in the game and want to kill bosses, like to do heroic. You to kill. I mean, Ansarek is not an easy boss on heroic by any means. And so in order to kill that boss, you got to have a certain level of concern and responsibility and um desire to improve. But it's a whole different ball game. It's like reviewing your own logs, looking at your own tape, as it were, and trying to solve your problems is something that is the next step in this game that so many people don't ever do because it's a game. It is a game at the end of the day. But it's a game that's fun to play at the very, very high level, and these are the things you need to do. So yeah, I feel a little uncertain about this path we're on. I don't think it's a bad path, and I don't think I'm like wanting to stray from the path, but it is. I knew these things were going to happen, but it's different when it actually starts happening, when you actually start having these conversations, when you're actually looking at these things, when you're actually spending an hour to an hour and a half after raid looking through the logs and seeing both what you personally did wrong, like looking at yourself and seeing like, oh yeah, this is what I did wrong, I didn't hit this enough, I got hit by this too much. But then also like having to also look at other people, be like, oh,
Mm.
this is, look at this, this is not good. This is not good right here, we need to fix this. Yeah, I don't know, it's weird.
It's the other thing is too is like having never done this before. I think there is a balancing act of like identifying a problem and giving somebody a chance to fix it
Yeah,
versus just knee jerk pulling the trigger on something.
yeah,
Um, and I think that unfortunately, and I feel like this is the case in a lot of real world scenarios too, is like that isn't an easy line to draw. And in most cases is different on a case by case basis, like, so I don't know. All of this aside, it's not something we need to dive into super heavily today. But I guess I wanted to bring it up because it is raid related. It is something that we're starting to work on.
hmm,
And it's just something new. It's something to talk about. So as we get more and more into this, maybe we will have more thoughts. Maybe we will be able to provide insights to new prospective mythic raiding guild leaders and officers in those guilds. Um, yeah.
yeah. I mean, I definitely think this is something that a lot of people have wanted to do but have not necessarily succeeded at doing. And I'm not saying like I guarantee we are going to succeed at this, I'm not saying that at all. I just, it's a big shift, it's a big change. And what we can at least do is kind of chronicle how that goes.
Yeah.
We'll see, I
What
don't know.
doesn't work.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, well, I guess, is there anything else, Scott, goals wise, or anything else gameplay related wise that you had kind of envisioned that we didn't already lay out for the coming weeks?
I don't know, man. My life is so insane right now. I just had jury duty for 2 days and I'm so behind with like work. And so I don't even know how much I'm going to get to play this week outside of raid times. Like I'm just like looking at my week going like, "Oh my god, I have so much to do everywhere." So I don't want to set any short-term goals right now because I don't even know what my play schedule is going to look like. But yeah, I mean, I want to obviously want to get better at like the real thing is I want to kind of mess with some of my alts, and I just have had zero time to do that, like at all. Like Paladin's getting a big buff in the upcoming patch. I really want to like get a prop Paladin geared up to test that out once it goes live. But I've just had zero time for alts, like at all. So I don't know. I guess my goal right now is to get to play the game the amount of time I want to, which is not. I'm not achieving that goal at least this week, but we'll see.
Gotcha. Well, I think as far as the show today is concerned, that's about all we had. But the question I have for the week is, have you guys started to creep into tens yet? And time them, I guess, is the main question I have. Not just the like weekly no lever stuff, but have you started timing tens or maybe even stepped into the mythic raid? Because ultimately, I kind of want to know how everything's feeling from your perspective. Because Scott and I just gave our perspective and kind of what we've been experiencing, um, but I want to know what you guys are thinking. Like, are we on brand here? Are we off base? Like, let us know what the more difficult content is feeling like to you, and maybe you found ways to mitigate some of the complaints that we've had. Love to hear those as well. But as always, you can contact us over, you can email us at yellingintothevoidwow@gmail.com. YouTube is at yelling into the void wow, and Twitter is at into the void wow.
And if you're not already subscribed, please do so. We want to make sure you don't miss an episode, so you can make sure those are sent to you automatically via the magic of the internet. You can find us on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, and pretty much anywhere else podcasts can be found.
And then also please liking, subscribing, and commenting on YouTube. I love interacting with the comments on YouTube, so please come over and say hi. Also, as far as streaming goes, I'm done making promises on when we're going to stream because, like Scott has said, life has been an absolute like tornado lately. So all of the promises that I've set the last 2 weeks, I've said I was going to start streaming, have just kind of like went out the window. So I'll stream when I can get to it. Is my next promise. So hopefully, I'll see you sometime soon.
There we go.
But again, comment, like, subscribe. All of these help us get more exposure and introduce to new people. So, um, with all of that said, guys, I appreciate everybody for listening. And until next time, we'll just be over here yelling into the void.